MUEUM by Tenement Press, very distinctive yellow covers. We've got a lot to get through. I'm going to race through this introduction. Many thanks to Dominic at Tenement Press and everyone at the publishing house for making this publication, and of course the whole series possible, one of the most eclectic in our contemporary culture, ranging from Arabic poetry through the Catalan to obviously the novella come manifesto that is MUEUM. We have visionary writing, 700 plus pages of them from Geoffrey Vallance. We have the exact opposite, just recently published, almost Olympian sentences of haiku-like intensity, and much else besides. Pasolini's La Rabbia coming later in the year, etc., etc. A hybrid press, as would you expect perhaps from the name Tenement Press. Many different people live in a tenement. They share the same space, in this case the covers of the press, but otherwise they're very, very different people. They coexist rather than get forced, of course, as we know with a lot of publishing, into a mould, a template that the publisher has decided the book should be. Several well-known writers who aren't here tonight have had their books radically transformed by editors at publishing houses. A writer who lives reasonably close to here, I won't name, proposed a book written by a male character, voiced by a male character in the third person. In the present, he received responses and feedback from his editor, who said, loving the book, just a couple of things, just wondering if we could move it historical, put it in the first person, and I'd like a woman to be the main character. So 3 small changes there, which of course the writer didn't accept and went on to publish it in a small press, similar in spirit and intensity and commitment to Tenement Press. So it's very difficult out there to be a publisher, and we're delighted that Tenement Press are literally holding on to their own fire escape as they do these incredible titles and release them into the world. Of course, the offspring, Tenement Press, of Hotel. Hotel, a radical magazine, still online available, and hopefully with endless new possibilities emerging out of its own rooms. Hotel, of course, again, a temporary space for articles and ephemeral pieces and statements across the board, across the waterfront of literary possibility. Partisan Hotel is the website's name, and I think Partisan will suggest the quality of the commitment. So many thanks to Dominic and all at Tenement and Hotel. Many thanks to Denise and the Brick Lane Bookshop team for putting this event on and allowing everyone to be here. Now we have an incredible lineup here for you, which I will introduce very shortly. Just to say, my link to this project is having been kindly invited by Dominic and Stephen Fowler to speak with Stephen in advance of publication. You'll find that conversation on the MUEUM page of Tenement Press's site. And also, I think, circulating in other forms. Milo sitting quietly here, suitably quiet, because he's recording this event. It's from Resonance Extra, incredibly committed collaborator already for this project, I'm sure many in the future. And this conversation, I believe, hopefully not this bit, Milo, will be going out on Resonance Extra in due course. Is that correct, Doc? That's correct, yeah. So all sorts of multimedia outputs for this event, let alone this whole project, which is suitable given the talent at its core. Now, enough about that talent, let's focus on the other talent first of all. Now, we have an incredible lineup for you, and I would argue that the event idea holding this particular gathering together, I would propose, about the many, many other ways into and out of MUEUM, would be the idea of place, the precarious and place. That would be my pitch to the evening. Whether you take that or not, it's entirely up to you, and it makes no difference to me or to the event, because I'm not in any way involved once I move down the corridor. But I would propose the precarious and place, or a way of thinking about how our contributors tonight all kind of speak to and from MUEUM. I'd like to start with the first person in the lineup, Chris McCabe, incredible figure across the culture and across the country, of course, the librarian at the National Poetry Library at the South Bank, author of numerous collections of poetry, collaborations with artists and others. But perhaps most resonantly for my proposal tonight, he's the ongoing author of what will be a 7-volume collection of engagements with the poets and the places of the great Victorian cemeteries of London. Now, Chris, you're on number 5 come out yet? About to come out?
Later. Yeah.
Later.
Not
5 about coming out later. Okay, so keep an eye on the calendar for that. Later. Number 5 in the tour of 7 Victorian cemeteries. Incredible scenes in those earlier books where, again, with fellow travellers in the audience, he has engaged with the dead poets of the cemeteries in question and brought them back to vivid imaginative life, and he continues to do that as he circles the city of London. Now, the second person speaking tonight is Chloe Origis. Now, Chloe's Mexican, but she's the award-winning writer of 3 novels, all of which find Chloe's narrator in a precarious situation, in a liminal space. Now, in the first book, Book of Clouds, the narrator is in Berlin, very, very unsettled, uncertain, all sorts of things going on there, trying to find a way to be in a new city. The narrator then moves in a different book, asunder to London. Similar situation, very different city, different tensions, different dynamic. Again, a precarious relationship to place. And interestingly for our purposes tonight, the narrator also has a direct engagement with the National Gallery, not dissimilar to the narrator of MUEUM, more on that in a minute. And then in the most recent novel by Chloe Origis, Sea Monsters, she's a teenager, the narrator is a teenager in Mexico, a rather distinctive teenager in the Mexico of the 1980s, in the liminal spaces of the beach, where all sorts of special possibilities are available to her. So very much a precarious identity in relationship to place across 3 very different locations. Ian Sinclair, of course, needs no introduction to any of you, particularly where we are in this part of London. He himself has circled the city in many, many different ways, on foot, alongside the car of Chris Pettit in London Orbital, and also, of course, with many collaborators in many, many different books, none of which I need to remind you of at this point. So he has a fundamental relationship to place, and arguably a precarious one, of course, because the city that he has hymned and celebrated in so many ways has changed radically around him over the last 50 or so years. Not only Ian Sinclair, of course. Just walking here tonight, and I took a chance and I cut down off Red Church Street, arguably the weirdest simulacrum of a street in London, down Chance Street. I took a chance down Chance Street. Now, Chance Street, as many of you will know, is not a very long street. It's only about twice the length of this shop, literally, between Red Church Street and the main road. I went down the pavement and I was about 20 feet down, and a car was coming this way on the road, and another car, I realised very shortly afterwards, was coming behind me towards the main road. And instead of waiting for the first car, which had got the advantage to come through, it decided to ride onto the pavement where I was standing, because it was so important, the journey that car was making, that it had to carry on at the greatest speed possible. And literally came onto the pavement where this chair is in relation to my foot, did its thing and went off into the night. Precarious encounter with place on Chance Street. So I literally embody my own theme right now, this evening. Also, of course, as we cycle down, or as we are cycled upon by cyclists today. Now, I do cycle, but it's very hard now, being an old man, of course, to judge the speed of a bike, particularly when it's an electric bike. It appears to be going at a certain speed as it approaches you, and then changes its speed. So even the old certainties around bikes have been smashed by neoliberalism. We don't know whether the bike is a pedal bike, an electric bike, or some other form of power as yet to be revealed to us. Precarious relationships to place. That's the link, it seems to me. And no more precarious relationship to place is there in this evening's contributions than, of course, the narrator's experience at the heart of Stephen J. Fowler's incredible new book, MUEUM. Precarious because they're working in an establishment that doesn't value them at all. That's, of course, nothing new in the current administration and in any of the previous administrations. But they are precarious in relation to world history as well as employment contracts. They are surrounded by the world, which itself is precarious. And, of course, much of the world in the novel should not be in that building, but should be somewhere else back in the world. So already a hall of mirrors that's very precarious. And our narrator tries to find their way through it in association with others. And that is the source of the evening that we're about to encounter and experience. And so now do please welcome, they will come up in due course in their own way after the previous contributors finished, but do now please welcome, to start us off this evening, the poet of the dead, quite literally, bringing them back to life, Chris McCabe.